I think it's recording started. Welcome to Service Binding Operator Weekly Developer Meeting. So today we are going to discuss about one of the PR that is added, that is 906 and related topics. So I added this because I think that is relevant. And please add if you have any other topic to discuss. Yeah, I can see some others are adding. Okay, good. Uh, Yeah, since I added that, I think I can start. I don't know, John is here in the call, not yet, I think. Okay. So I can share my screen and then I'll just try to share my thought and then I would like to get others' feedback on the same. Yeah, it's something that, connected with the spec and what we are going to do with the, uh, that change, the recommendation. So can I see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. So this is John added this PR to fix the issue that he reported a couple of months back, and allow constant values in service binding name. Again, this is in alignment with the well-defined fields that is recommended by the spec. Uh, so there is something called provider and type. These are some of the constants that is required in the uh, backing service. I think what they call provision service, right? So in the secret, provision service secret. So I think one of the way he want this to be added as constants into the annotation, so that will be reflected in the what you call the intermediate secret in our case. And then I can see the Protrax comment here that this we are trying to follow the spec and spec doesn't have this constant. So he proposed something, but later I can see John send a issue into the spec itself to add this feature that is.
Can you describe the issues as a user? What
Okay.
was
Okay, this I can tell my observation, that is this provider and type, these are the two values that is going to be reflected in the file system in the config directory, so which can be inferred by the application and then decide what kind of, who is the provider, what kind of resource it is, I mean the database or yeah. So imagine that I can let me try to elaborate a little more. So imagine that we injected these values into the file system by mounting into volume, and how do the application can decide what kind of provider, who injected, or what kind of type it is. So let's say if we have these two values available, they can decipher this information from there, right? That was the reason that spec has this feature to have this type and provider. It's actually not a must, but it is a recommended feature. Now
Becho, can I add something to that? In the spec, in the service binding, I have pasted a link. In the service binding spec, they have two fields, type and provider. So
yeah
why do we need to achieve this through the annotations?
yeah
Maybe what you, I mean, we have a real user here, so maybe what you can actually raise the voice, because I'm seeing him suffering from the very same issue. So perhaps you can better explain why it would be useful to have annotation.
Yeah, like the mapping itself is a good workaround, but I can't, if I need to, let's say, if we actually not have this fixed as proposed, basically every client, including OpenShift console, although will need to have some certain hacks to implement this. But if we allow people to just basically provide those hard-coded values as part of the spec, because they will never change, they will always be there, they should be part of the TRD spec. And if they are there, it means that no matter what service binding TR you will create, you will always get those values and they always will be mounted as files. And this doesn't even need to apply to the type and provider. We can we actually found many other things that are just basically need to be hard coded. Let's say, for example, you always want to have hard coded SSL, right? You will never use HTTP port or something, so you hard code the port, and that's part of your binding spec in CRD rather than CR. So this means that you don't need to make the changes in every possible client for service binding. You're just making it for the service provider, and it's from, let's say, weeks of work, it just becomes the seconds of work. You just add things to CRD and it works.
We want to give opportunity to service providers to add those annotations so that the binding creators do not need to do anything particular. That's kind of my
okay.
what I can understand, right, Wojciech? So right now the binding creator can influence that, but as you said, the client. But you have to do it for every single binding you want to introduce. If you move that, or if you give opportunity to service provider to add annotation on CRD, then the service bindings become super empty and super default, and then you don't need to have any particular logic injected there, right?
Exactly. And this is also ecosystem problem, because, for example, OpenShift, there's just this, I don't want to call it simplified, but there's just this arrow that just creates the service binding. So if I want to just document things, okay, create arrow, now go edit service binding, add the mapping and things like that, it just becomes the nightmare story, because you're doing so many different things on a client side and telling them to do, rather than just have a service that just defines this value. So I think it's more describes the overall problem of ecosystem. It's nothing to do with your service binding. It's like, although and all the currently available service binding clients that simplify service binding creations for users are very naive. They just basically create service binding as it is, right? And to really work around that, this will be the main feature that will allow us as a service creators to actually control it and still use those naive clients, but on the other hand, do some extra work for those people. And the type, and I can tell you, there was a gazillion of the requirements that we needed to kind of work around, break our APIs, and it raised many eyebrows, because we constantly shifting is V17 or something, but all of those are just because we need to satisfy those service binding things. There's no other value for users. And then those users need to create the CRD with this way. So for example, if I have a CRD, it needs to actually have a type, a Kafka, but my actually object is manage Kafka connection. So it seems redundant.
Wojciech, you said that there are also other metadata that you believe, instead of being defined in the custom resource, should be defined at the service, so at the CRD.
Yeah, like the SSL port will be the
SSL port.
SSL, like if your
SSL,
service always use SSL, or if you use certain things like in our case, we need to have a requirement from Quarkus folks to include the authentication mechanism, which always will be the same. It's a SASL plane. We also need to put those details in CRD, and every client needs to. So if the client creates a CRD with the invalid value, it should be the constant, but we're actually forcing every client to actually create it. So, which is bummer.
Yeah. I think I understand. I think the team got it as well. Bayou, with regards to Bayou and Predrag, with regards to the spec, do you know how we are managing SSL and ports?
Yeah, well, what he's referring is SSL ports of just like two variables needs to be propagated to application. It could be named foo and bar, but what he wants to say here that for certain resources, some values needs to be there as default and actually recommended. So it's not really, I mean, what Wojciech is actually saying is really like scoped on a Kafka resource. But the problem is general. So you want to have a couple of bindings which are practically always, we have always the same value for the consumers, or like recommended value, so to say. And then you could practically override it if you want in the binding, but in the 99% of the case, you don't want to do it. Like, and I understand Wojciech. So we also want to kind of do the marketing around UI and the topology view and how we can nicely bind a service to application via drag and drop, like making those arrows. But as Wojciech mentioned, if we want to really kind of recommend people to do that and that this really works, then the service bindings which are generated by the UI should be very, very plain, and they should not contain anything more than the service reference and the application reference, because the UI itself doesn't have the knowledge to understand. Okay, now I'm binding a Kafka to application. I need to maybe do add additional mappings in the service binding itself. So in the 99% of the case, through the UI, things should just simply work. And yeah, Wojciech, am I getting this right?
100% right, and to extend it, we can go even further, because I'm talking with OpenShift folks, and I'm hoping to, let's say, facilitate some discussion to even being able to put the name of the service binding in this arrow, because then once we start binding to files, first of all, binding to files, it's not enabled by default at the moment. So once it becomes default, every binding will become there. So users, when doing their arrow, they should decide if they want a file or environment, because some of the applications may still require just environment. And second one, once we bind to files, also the name of the binding will become important. So that's why, because like the name of the binding will be literally the location in the container that you bind to. So the way I recommended to Node.js and Quarkus group is to ignore the name and look for the type. But then whatever I try to change the ecosystem, there's something hitting me in the head. So if we resolve this problem, I can go to Quarkus and Node.js folks and tell, okay, you ignore the file name. We don't need to change these things in OpenShift. We basically iterate through the bindings folder and look for certain type. If there is certain type down there, then that's it. But then the type needs to become a little bit of more required or more, first-class citizen of the core SBO operator, which is not at the moment. It's in a spec, but it's kind of up to the implementation guy that adds this.
Yeah, but I think so I would be in favor of this pull request. What is the opinion of the rest of the team?
Okay, there is some catch here, so I want to come to their discussion. So, okay, yeah, this PR he sent here, and it's adding, but he trying to there is another PR that adding the same info into the spec also, because one of the thing what product saying here is that this should be there in the spec, then only we can add that, right? So I can see there is another PR here which is adding the same. This is, by the way, in the spec discussion. I can see 22 hours ago there was a PR, and but I can see some resistance to this from Ben regarding the same. Now, so that means we need to have further discussion here, either to this to be included. So what is written here is, I'll open up the change. This changes in the extension, by the way, in the secret generation strategies. There is a statement adding on a static key value pair into the binding secret like this. So probably now. But here it is just only one key is mentioned. I hope this is something like an example, right? This could be any arbitrary static keys, key values. That's my understanding.
Yeah, in terms of the format, it may actually, because you have a path, so you could actually, in terms of the supporting the format, it will be best to not include this, because semantically, if you would like to build the ABF from it, the kind of how the syntax languages, this will be breaking the ABF. So ideally, you want to have service binding key, and then instead of value, will be having you have a path for the path things. So now you will value equals something, and that will be semantically valid.
Yeah, that would be better to have a dedicated key for that. Yeah.
Yeah, because then it will actually restrict you from building any other things in the future, because you will have this oddball that's just basically its value. So it could be value as a value equals, and then you will have I can say like this would be similar to mapping, so it would be like Go template or something, right?
Okay, yeah. So I think we should see how we can push for this again. But the discussion, the point that he's bringing up is that there is another proposal, that is to introduce similar behavior through something called mappings. So again, it's going back to the mapping feature, but I think that proposal is a bit heavy, which is taking out the mappings from the core and moving into an extension. And that extension, whether it is going to be part of this spec or not, is not yet decided. Still discussion is going on. And that extension can provide this kind of additional, values. So we need to.
This is on CR level. So I think those are like two different use cases. So on a CRD level, is that service creator tells you what you really should. It just simplifies so you can get the defaults. And mapping is that, okay, I don't like the defaults, I want to shape them to my own thing. And those are advanced users that, I haven't, like what we're really trying to do in Red Hat is just basically service binding should be so easy to create that you should even type it by hand. And the mapping should be very rarely employed unless you will have some operator that will create the service binding things based on your requirements and things like that.
Yeah, right. So I think we should continue this discussion and see how we can improve this PR. Then only, but meanwhile, I don't know whether we need to consider this PR as a blocker for the issue that is there in our system. So, Predrag, what do you think? Do we need to wait for the spec to be clarified to get this PR merged, or?
I mean, so we can drift from the spec, right? So that's, I mean, and I see like, Wojciech needs that. We need that. So there are a couple of, pros in doing that. Like, I mean, drifting, which means that we are adding additional, say, the key, which is we can understand in and parse. And yeah, we can definitely do it because we have a use case for that. If this is, it will be just academical, debate, then I would rather like wait for the spec. But it seems that they are not willing to include this and to have these true mappings, which
I think
makes,
we can push that to the spec if we. It's fair. We have a use case for it, and we should be able to push this, and it's part of the extension. So I don't see any reason. There is I have not been able to read exactly what John has been mentioning on the other pull request, but I believe we should try to push that and make it part of the specification. This is a good case. If it does not happen, then we can implement it. We can still support it, but
sure,
we need to make sure that we document that carefully into our implementation and into our documentation. That is very important that we call out what are the advantages of our implementation and what we are doing more and why we have been doing it and why we believe that it is providing more value than something that will just support the official spec.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody added any other topic? Oh, can see more topics now. Okay. No. That is all discussion, right? No, there are a couple of more topics here. Status of the new reconciliation loop. Okay, by the way, anything else to add there? I thought I have done there. Or we can move to the next topic.
This is notes.
Okay. Status of the new reconciliation loop. Okay, this Predrag you added or?
No, I didn't. I mean, I was checking like,
Okay.
5 minutes before the meeting, so I didn't prepare anything. I mean, I can just tell you that today I'm gonna run the first acceptance test against the refactored loop and to see how things are working. I'm having a good progress, and yeah, so I really hope that by the next week I'm gonna have even like, I would say, a PR which can be reviewed.
Okay.
Predrag, just one more thing. In our current code base, there are some good comments in the code. So I hope the refactoring that you're doing, in that also there are good comments describing the function and what it does.
I mean, when the time when the PR will be there for review, definitely I'm going to add things. And if things are not there, then I consider that as a part of the review feedback to be added. But like, if in general, if you need the comments to explain what the code does, then it smells as a bad code. So the code should be self-describable in a normal way.
Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. What is this topic? Oppress the community of.
Yeah, it's it's by me. So there is an open work in progress PR. Currently, it describes about all the tests that we would be dropping. So basically, we would try to avoid rebinding whenever there is a change on service or workload application. So currently, service binding operator is the reconcile is stimulus to the changes at backing service side and application side. So we would just be reconciling and watching for service binding resources. And if at all, an extension of the story would be that if at all the service binding resource status has failed, then we would reconcile. But otherwise, there would be no watches on services and application. So this is just a heads up that we would be dropping watches. Yeah.
Can you add the corresponding issue in the description? This
Sure.
PR?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What is the next topic? Working on a set of. That's incomplete.
A set of, yeah, it's incomplete indeed. That's me who wrote it. Yeah. So the idea here is that we know that we want to help the developers to more easily bind their services with their application. But right now we have very few services, backing services, that are providing the metadata that we need. So we have been brainstorming in different discussions about the idea of having a set of bindings or a set of metadata or annotation that we will be looking for, which will enable us to automatically make bindings for some services. So, for example, you have MySQL and PostgreSQL. They all have a URL, they all have a password, they all have a username, or something like that. So we could detect those annotation or those metadata, and we could allow to build service binding directly for those resources. So that is something that we would have So you have proposed the same for Quarkus. Okay.
Yeah, idea was that you have service binding object and you have a CRD binding spec, which is another CR that just basically you're not looking for individual operator CRs. You will have your own, but this actually boils back to having strongly defined types. And I kind of being blamed for bringing some very top level stuff that may not be service binding core. But basically, if we actually go in managed services or other providers, if we enforce the type, then we can reference them in a spec, or those could be just basically extending the CRD spec, but in service binding object. So then you don't need to edit, or you basically wrap existing CRD, let's say existing Postgres. And there's another thing that I think folks are exploring is that this is not going to work for things like Helm. So, and the Helm, despite our company is very like operators are everywhere, Helm, it's still the most popular solution for pushing things to OpenShift even. So it's going to enable not only CRD, but you will be able to also support things like Helm. And this way, I think it's like, once we add that, the working with the service binding operator will be a breeze. Currently, it's very like hard. You know, you need to ask people to do some stuff and integrate and things like that. Then anyone could do it, right? Community and things like that.
Exactly. So it's nearly about having a repository of bindings that we can automate and that we can consume for different services, and that the developer could be contributing to instead of the people who are owner of the services, which might take a longer time, in fact.
Yeah, and in fact, that I was also talking with the Christian from OpenShift Console, and this kind of idea they have with the Helm, that Red Hat had this catalog that can provide those Helm charts. And the same way we can actually have GitHub repository where community can add those, right? Those CRD extensions, and suddenly when you install the service binding operator in OpenShift, you can fetch it, right? So you will be able to not only, because there's, if someone adds that, there's a problem how you kind of explore it. So you need to have one place where you will hold them, and this will be like Red Hat service binding extensions catalog, or you name it. If you have that, you can get this into all the OpenShift, no problem.
Exactly. So I think we are very much aligned, and that's what we are. I think that's what we are aiming for. So today it's a bit premature because we don't have the bandwidth to handle this, but it's very important and very key to drive adoption and remove the barriers for service binding, and to make sure that it's going to be consumed properly on Odoo and VS Code connector. But also, you told it also from the OpenShift Developer Console, because in fact, how do you discover that you can bind services? It's very hard when you are
it's basically, I have been working between us, right? I know this is recorded, but I think that overall thing is that the service binding arrow, it's good, but if we want to get it popular, I think you mentioned this service binding dedicated UI. Once there will be file binding, there's binding, the mapping and things like that. There needs to be more dedicated UI where you will see these things. I'm happy for you, like, our team already done some extension for OpenShift, so we can help you with some, let's say, even collecting how this would look like. I actually have in mind how this could work, like, because we actually working with the Quarkus team that has a different requirements. There was a Python data science that also want to do it. It's not that managed services actually, kind of stepping into your area. We just, in fact, kind of connecting all the people because we will have those first service that's had this very strong requirements for binding.
So I believe we are all heading into the same direction. So that's good.
Yeah, I think it's so funny that like we
came
without
to the same conclusion.
yeah, without speaking, we kind of came to the same conclusion, and many people saying like those arrows is good, but it's at some point I was actually, that's why I wanted John discuss, see like if we actually should add file binding when you drop this arrow, that should be the default one, right, or things like that. But if we actually have a plans for dedicated UI, I think this is the very good step, and it will change. It's not that we wanted this arrow to go away, but many developers who are actually try this, we actually also looking to get some user trials, so we actually get real users of managed Kafkas trying the end-to-end flow, and the feeling was that, okay, this is not going to work, right? I really want to have something specific. And also there's this thing like idea of service binding as a library, right? So you have service binding as a spec that could be, let's say, implemented, but could you actually have a library for parsing the spec written in Golang, and that could be, let's say, done part of the spec, and then we could use this library within our operator. Because some people will have a use case for operator, and some people you will okay, I have an operator. Could I actually have this very essential elements of the binding, or actually understanding the binding to actually produce this mapping? So then my operator doesn't need to deal with the complexity, or you can actually automatically parse those things inside. And I think this is already possible. It's just not being advertised as a use case.
So you know what? It's something that is already ongoing because we are doing it for Odoo. So
okay.
So
okay.
yeah, the idea is that for Odoo, we want to enable people to do the link operation, even if service binding is not present on the cluster. So what it will do is that it will look for the annotation. If they are not there, we will generate them, and then it will create the service binding resource as well.
This is really good information, because I was actually, we also had this kind of need to have the discussion how we can make this service binding available everywhere. And I actually investigated how I can just create those mappings and things like that. So basically, as managed service integrating with Odoo will mean that if you do it, then we don't need to bother that much, right?
And you can maybe integrate it into your Rosas CLI as well.
Jesus, this is the best meeting we had so far. Sorry, I'm muting myself, but I'm so excited. This sounds amazing, guys. Like do you mind, like, we have this as meeting notes? Maybe we can actually do some mind map or something like that and share it with my like, the things I'm talking about are a little above my pay grade, but many people will be really excited to see this plans kind of being announced in some kind of form.
Yeah, let's work a little bit more on the details to make sure that it is actionable, and then once we have it actionable, we can start to speak about it a bit more. It's more, we have some focus right now, and we need to keep this focus until we deliver. And
exactly.
That doesn't mean that we don't have to prepare what's next. Yeah. But let's make sure that we keep the focus, and we all need it. In fact, I need it because I'm still learning a lot of things, and I'm sure the team also need it. So I don't want to go in too many directions at once. But it's I agree. It's very funny to see that we came to conclusions that are exactly the same, but from different angles and from different perspectives. That really means that we are on something tangible. Yeah. Cool. So maybe for the binding UI, what I will do is that I will look at creating a dedicated call where we can speak about that. I already discussed it with Serena for the Odyssey part. But we need to brainstorm and list the use cases that we want to cover, and then involve a little bit of UX maybe as well. So and if we have some mockups that we can come up with all together, that will be very helpful, I believe.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay. I think that's our last topic for the discussion, right? So anybody else want to add anything else? Or
It's time to open a bottle of wine, no?
yeah. So we need
Quick question. You mentioned that you're actually working on it to add the service binding into Odo.
Yeah.
And so would it be possible for us to kind of know there's the issue that we can watch? Because this is the biggest exciting thing I heard so far. You know, it's if we actually can get it before Summit, which happens with roughly a month, we can actually show it on the stage. So it will be amazing.
So this is part of the work that Predrag is doing on the reconciliation loop. So we need to check with him how far he has been.
I think I know. I'm aware of that PR and work he's doing. It's actually amazing PR. So I will watch it. But I just wasn't aware that he's actually killing two birds by one stone. Actually, he's killing probably 17 birds.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. It's amazing job. I'm really like, I haven't been so excited, So
cool. We are sharing your excitement, definitely.
And really, really good job, team. Right?
So I think that's it for today.
Yeah, we need a couple of more details, like who want to volunteer to moderate the next meeting. So I was doing it this meeting and previous one. So, and also we need someone to take notes. And thanks, Steven, to doing this detailed notes. That's really good.
Yeah, I still have more to add because I have been speaking while during the meeting, so I need to.
Yeah, I can take notes.
Avini, you're
Yeah.
okay. And moderating this conversation, like I was doing. I don't know how it is, but still, anybody else want to sign up?
I can do that, Pedro.
Okay, Dhruti. Okay, Dhruti will do this moderation next time, and then Dhruti just asked.
Love it.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Love it. Thank you, Dhruti and Avni. Sounds good. Thank you, everyone, and good work. And let's keep up with the good work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.